This
15 years of
conference will now be recorded.
past 15 years, if you look into data warehousing environments or OLAP environments, right? Just imagine just 15 years back or 15 years back, we don't have much technologies in the data warehousing or OLAP environment. That is the reason we use it to have both the source and target is a Oracle or SQL Server. Slowly, we have a couple of new technologies came into the picture after the Teradata, right? After the Teradata is also completely vendor managed environment. It's very, very costly software or license wise. Next, it moved to Cassandra along with this Hadoop environment and Cassandra. Cassandra, there are some challenges with the Cassandra when it will not go frequently down the servers, but the Cassandra side, if once the database is down, it is difficult to bring up and to recover the everything. So slowly, there are column-oriented databases came into the picture from 2010 and 11. So the things have changed, like Vertica, HP Vertica, and Sybase IQ environments. The Sybase IQ is also a Snowflake, it's a column-oriented databases. So when we are using the regular OLTP softwares or applications in the OLAP environment, we are facing a lot of challenges. Consider those challenges, right? New technologies has been introduced like column-oriented databases and NoSQL environments. But what happened again? Everything is your local environments, everything on premises. There are some challenges with on premises. It is not commodity hardware. High-end hardware is required to maintain these clusters and to maintain the huge data set, security-wise, firewalls, network, everything is. Just if you think about if you want to buy a car, right, you have to manage the car. First, you have to invest something for that car, and again, you have to spend something for managing the car, the maintenance. If something goes wrong, if some accident happened, or if something damaged, you have to put extra expenditure on this thing, right? The same like on-premises environment. If you look at your own data center, right, of the own data centers, if something goes wrong, there should be some network guy, DBA is required, Unix guy is required, several support guys along with this data center, right? I just assume if you have a multiple car service providers in your locality, right? Whenever you are calling in, the car is available, service is available. Just you can use and pay money and leave like that. You don't want to worry about many things. So from there, the Snowflake came into the picture. So the Snowflake, it is a OLAP environment and column-oriented databases. We can deploy the same Snowflake into any of the cloud service like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. So the second advantage of the Snowflake is, right, so generally what is required when we are storing the data, when we are maintaining the data as a cluster, we need a minimum few things are required. One is there should be some storage capacity. You have to store your data, and at the same time, when you process the data, you need enough resources in terms of the memory or in terms of the CPU, in terms of the network or anything. Resources are required. So in general, if you talk about the Redshift or if you talk about the Google BigQuery, what will happen when you are executing the queries or when you are loading the data or when you are maintaining the data into your environments, these things will calculate it all together. Storage and processing, everything will calculate together. But what will happen in the Snowflake? Snowflake has divided into two parts. Main thing is the storage and the processing doesn't come together. It will be a separate part. Whatever the data you are storing, there is a separate charge, and whatever the process you are doing, that will calculate in a separate. That means if you are not using your database, suppose I have loaded the data yesterday and only every weekend I am executing some reports for CIO purpose, right? So in such a case, only when the query is executed on a weekend, then only the charge will apply on a basis of seconds, right? So what the advantage is, right? It is not clubbing together the storage and the processing of the queries. That is the main advantage. Second thing, you can choose yourself either AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, GCP, any platform, whatever the platform you want, you can select. Next, right, there are some native environments, the cloud, whatever the cloud service provider, cloud services are there, right? For the security, LDAP authentication, or network, right? All those service, whatever the service provider are like AWS, whatever they are providing, all those things we can integrate with our Snowflake. So basically there are three layers are there. One is service provider time side, and the second one is storage. Third one is processor side. That is nothing but whatever the warehouse it is there. So suppose if you want, just think about your laptop. It's a laptop, it is having the storage, and at the same time there are some resources are there. So minimum 2 CPUs are there, or 2 core are there, 32 core and servers, right? And at the same time some 200 of 30 GB or 12 GB RAM will be there. But servers, if you are talking about the high configuration, we will have a 750 GB memory and some 40 to 60 terabytes of the storage, and 32 CPU, 16 logical and 16 physical, and network bandwidth, right? All those things comes into the picture. So considering all those things, the Snowflake, it is having some different flavor, right? Not like a OLTP environment. It is there are some competitors for Snowflake like Amazon Redshift or Google BigQuery, but comparing to all those things, Snowflake have the major difference is storage and processing layer. We are not making together. It is two different things actually. So the major features on the Snowflake side, right? Whatever the data you are inserting, automatically in the background process, it will convert the data into, it will encrypt the data actually. That is the more security data. Snowflake, when suppose you are inserting the data into your database tables. So the data is getting inserted. While inserting the data into Snowflake tables, what will happen in the background? Automatically, it will encrypt the data. That means it is not a user readable format, right? Second thing, but you can ask one question: if the data is encrypted, how the queries are? You can see the data end user. Snowflake is capable, when you execute the queries against the Snowflake database, Snowflake is capable to read the data. That means encrypted the data. Whatever the encrypted data it is there, it is capable to read the encrypted data. And one more thing, right? The compression part. It is a highly compressed environment. That means whatever the data, raw data you are sending into Snowflake, it will compress the data and it will reduce the storage footprint. That means that is minimizing the cost, right? That is one advantage. Second thing, there are some very that means unique features are there in the Snowflake side actually. Caching. Generally in data warehousing or OLAP environments, we are not maintaining the caching. But in the Snowflake, we are maintaining the caching. Suppose user A is executed one query. After 1 hour or after next day, after 6 hours, user B is executing the same query but generating the same report. What will happen? Since already similar type of query is already executed and it is available at the catalog level and the metadata level, the second query, second time user B, it is not required to execute the same query. Then the background process, whatever the data it is there available, it will fetch the data, provided in between these 6 hours, there should not be any data changes in the base tables. So what is the advantage? Generally, you are in the OLAP environments on a weekly batches are there, some tables. So in the only weekends, the batch will happen. In between one weekend to the next weekend, the 7 days data will not get changed. So if you execute any queries against the Snowflake, if you execute once, the cache will have the data based on the query ID. It will fetch the next time, it will fetch the data from the database. The advantage is it will reduce the traffic. it will reduce the IO operation against the table, right? That is where the caching will helps you. Second part, right? There is one more concept is called as a time travel. Time travel is nothing but the, suppose you are maintaining the data. Some applications if you look at the your own data centers, we are maintaining past 7 years or 8 years of the data. If you talk about the Citibank, if you talk about the HDFC or Airtel, the customer care information will be ever, right? They will not delete any data, because even if you go and look into their data, you will see past 3 years or 4 years of the data, but actively you can see only 6 years, 6 months of the data, right? So the customer care information, or you are calling to the customer care and raising some requests or queries, whatever that information will always maintain. They will not delete the data. So, but when the data is keep on growing, you can see some performance issues, and at the same time, we can't maintain this much huge data sets like terabytes and petabytes of the data in the database. It comes in the cost effective. That is the reason. After a certain period of time, we can move all the data which are not really required into some either Hadoop environments or some low cost environments. But in a Snowflake, what we are doing, there is a time travel, is nothing but if it is critical, by default, it will have only 1 day data, but based on your environment, it's a standard edition or enterprise edition or business critical edition. Based on the type of edition you are taking the license, based on that one you can take. But when we are talking about the enterprise, generally we are taking the enterprise edition, right? If it is not a business very critical applications, you can make 91 days of the data into your Snowflake, and after that automatically the older data will get rid of. But what will happen, suppose if after 91 days there is a buffer time is there, suppose if the accidentally or unknowingly if I delete the data in any one of our tables, what will happen? You can extract the data, from fail safe. That is a new one more feature is the fail safe. When after 91 days, if any data it is there, the data if you want to retrieve, if you want to restore from the Snowflake, that is not possible with the cloud services. You have to go and talk to Snowflake. Only Snowflake can restore the data. That is only 14 days of the buffer time. So total 105 days of the data you can maintain based on your retention policy, and that's where you can maintain the data in the Snowflake. Along with this Snowflake, right, there is one more nice concept actually, that is, suppose you are doing sometimes what will happen, it is a Mpp architecture. Snowflake will support Mpp architecture. Suppose you have 10 node cluster, if you have the 15 node cluster, right, you can create you can execute your queries. That means massively parallel processing. Wherever your data is there, the query will get executed. Wherever the data is available, it will get executed against those server, and you will get the data, right? That is the very, very important. That means it is a shared nothing architecture, but shared everything architecture in the data size. That means the data, whatever the data you are inserting in the Snowflake, the data will be stored in the shared manner, but while you are processing the queries, it is not required to share anything. That is shared nothing architecture, right? So one other thing what we discussed, right? Suppose when I am executing the query, right? Suppose if I am creating a table, I don't want any resources. I don't want any memory is required. I don't want any CPU utilization, nothing. I without zero resources, I can create the table. That means all the DDL operations are not required the resources. But when you are executing the queries by either inserting the data or extracting the data from Snowflake, what will happen? Then only the resources, that is nothing but a warehouses comes into the picture. Virtual warehouses. Virtual warehouses is nothing but just a one small servers. If you look into the data warehousing in AWS or Azure, right? In the AWS, if you go IAM, you can when you are clicking the IAM, you can see there is IAM, large resources or small, medium like that, right? It is having its own network, it is having its own CPU, and it is having its own memory. Everything will be available. So what is the advantage of resources? Whenever you are using, then only it is applicable the billing. Otherwise, the billing is not applicable. It supports ANSI SQL formats, all UTF-8 and ANSI SQL, everything it will get support. So far, any questions?
Ishwar, one question, Sandeep here. So, is there any ETL processing capability in this Snowflake, or can we do that processing kind of a thing, or the traditional ETL tools should be there with this also?
Yeah, we'll come to that point. That is the second part I will explain. Okay. Yeah. So far we have we understood what exactly the Snowflake is. There is a two. If we look into the copy statements, if you want to insert the data into your database, there is an import and export the data. It is an import. You can insert the data into your Snowflake tables. Instead of that one, there is a concept is called as a copy. The copy is nothing but the native utility provided by Snowflake to load the data either from S3 or from some other environments, either from within the Snowflake sharing environment or third-party locations or S3 or blob, from whatever it is, right? If you have the data from different heterogeneous systems, if you want to load the data into Snowflake, you can load the data using import. That is nothing but a copy statement. Copy is a native utility which is very fast, and that is the reason everyone will select the copy if you have the automation jobs. And the second, export is nothing but you can extract the data. Apart from that, that export is nothing but you can extract the data and you can send the data into keep into some S3 for the reporting purpose, or if you want to send the data into another environment, you can export the data. But this is only export and inserting the data and consumption of the data of your Snowflake environment. But suppose if you have any data in your some other environments, if you talk about the ELT, right? So ETL and ELT is a little bit, there are small changes are there. We are extracting the data and transforming and loading the data is ETL, and we are extracting the data and loading after that we are applying the transformation, that is different. So ETL and ELT. So here we have some new Snowpipe, right? Snowpipe is, we are calling general as a pipe, right? Snowpipe, it is a ETL facility, it is there. So suppose whatever the data, that is not a complete ETL, I'm not talking. Suppose if you are sending the data into some drop zone, and from there, if you want to load the data into your Snowflake environment, the moment the file comes, automatically it will load the data into your Snowflake environment. So that is, it is extracting the data from the files and it is loading the data. It will not do the proper transformations actually. Okay, so it will support the extracting. It will load the data into your Snowflake environment using Snowpipe. Snowpipe, it is almost like ETL environment. Okay, but it is not a complete ETL environment. And data sharing, generally what we are doing some changes in your production in pre-prod testing we are doing. If there is any monthly releases are there, we want to make your pre-prod or testing or UAT environment like similar like a production, right? In such a case, generally what you are doing in on-premises environment, what you are doing, right? You will create separate databases and you will export the data and loading the data. So you are cloning that one, right? So that means when you are making or cloning the pre-prod like a production, in both the environments, you are maintaining the same amount of data. That means if it is 100 terabytes, the same 100 terabytes will replicate into your other environments. So duplicate data will be in two different environments, even for testing. So, but sharing, it is not like that. It is a really a nice methodology or technique here. So what will happen in the sharing, right? If you want to test something, you want to clone from production to development or production to UAT environment, you can clone simply. And what will happen when it is cloning, it will not actually clone, it will not copy any data, just it will share the file level. Suppose you have the file in production environment, the data it is there and somewhere, you can clone into other UAT environment. It will not copy any files, just it will give the sharing at the file level. But that doesn't mean If you change in the UAT environment, that changes will not applicable into the production environment. It is it is independent environments. So that is the advantage, very really big advantage when we are doing some proper testing in the application flowcharts, right? We'll discuss about the Snowflake architecture, what exactly that architecture, how it works the architecture, what is the 3 different layers are there in the architecture, and the database storage layer or compute or virtual warehouses layer or cloud service layer, all those layers we will discuss. And what exactly the unique features in the Snowflake, either data encryption or how the encryption will happen in the background, and what is the compression, how the compression works in the data warehousing or Snowflake, and what is caching, what is the time travel, and what is the zero copy cloning. This is nothing but cloning, right? And data sharing and metadata services. This is the highlighted what are the new features and what exactly this availability zone, how the Snowflake will move the data into a particular availability zones and other stuff. I'm not talking more about the data types or parameters and all those stuff. I'm not talking. This is quite. That is the reason I added. It supports all ANSI supports, right? For all like Oracle SQL Server or DB2 or whatever it may be. Okay. If you look at if you are aware the Oracle or SQL Server, right? We have some procedures, stored procedures or functions or packages, right? And but in Snowflake, we'll have 2 different things. One is the stored procedures and functions along with this UDX, user defined functions. What is that one exactly? What exactly it will do? The thing is, right, when you are when we are loading the data, suppose if you want to do frequent operations, once you are doing only once, you can utilize the same procedure for others. You can create some stored procedures, but the stored procedures and functions in the same type, right? It is optional. The return values are optional, but functions should be mandatory. But third-party environments like UDXs, you can JavaScript will support in the Snowflake. Using the JavaScripts, you can create some stored procedures, everything, and you can deploy those things into those stored procedures into Snowflake, and you can leverage those things. That means it will support JavaScripting environment, and you can deploy all those stored procedures into, that is nothing but exactly, it's not stored, but it's a UDXs. Okay, user defined functions. Those UDXs into Snowflake. It is a very user-friendly data types. Actually, if you talk about Oracle, right, or SQL Server, specifically Oracle, the conversion date format conventions are very complex. You have to use toChar, toDate, and several things, right? But in the Snowflake or many OLAP environments, this is very simple. Actually, it is all data types are very date formats are simple. We can create some tables, we can create the databases, we can create warehouses, we can create the schemas, we can create the tables and the same temporary tables and the transient table. There are different types of transient databases and transient tables, and transient objects are there, or permanent tables. And we can see how, when you are loading the data, how many resources it are utilizing, how much time it is taking the time to load the data, and what are the file formats? UTF-8 format, the file format, right? There are multiple formats. It's a Parquet file, it will support JSON data, it will support, and UTF-8, all flat files, everything it will support to load the data, right? These are the common things. So what is suspended? Warehouse is nothing but, right, whenever you are loading the data, you need some resources. Dynamically, it will allocate based on your resources. But if you are not using, you can suspend that resources, right? And the thing is, right, in the suspend resources, it is we are trying to reduce our billing. Actually, that's all. Nothing apart from nothing. Okay. If once that your activity completed, if you are no longer using these warehouses, you can drop. And if you want to drop the table schemas and databases, how to work all those things, and what is the main difference between the traditional data warehouses and Snowflake environment, and what are the overall Snowflake traditional data warehouses in the sense your on-premises databases like Teradata and Oracle, all those things, right? What is the main difference between Teradata and Snowflake? And at the same time, who are the competitors like Google BigQuery or Amazon Redshift, right? All those things we'll discuss. How to do the cloning and everything you can show in the demo. Everything is a practical. It's not just a theoretical process. So at the end, we can see the administration side, right? Specifically user management or role management. You can create the users, you can assign the roles, and you can assign those roles to particular users. And what are all the default schemas? Just sometime at my session yesterday, some class has completed. That is the reason it's completed. My 30 days license version completed. Okay. So if you look into here, whenever you install the Snowflake, you can use the I'm using the AWS, right? This is the when you register for the AWS, this is your account, this is your account, and this is Snowflake, right? And this is the console, this is the tool. We can connect just directly. When you install the data Snowflake, by default you can get a demo DB and Snowflake and Snowflake sample data and UTL DB. So if you look into in the demo DB, each database will have two different schemas. One is information schema and other one is public schema. Ignore the public schema, just like a public Oracle, how we have the public schema. But the information schema, this is where you have the critical and all the information. That means this is where if you who are aware of the Oracle, right? $V session tables, $V monitor tables, all the $V views in the Oracle. The same way to monitor the databases, right? To monitor all the data, what is happening in the database, what are the pipes that is happening, how many procedures you have, how many schemas you have, how many sequences you are creating, how many stages you have, how many tables you have, or what are the constraints are there. All this information by default it will comes under information schema. Under the information schema we'll have all the tables. Apart from that we have other history tables also. But what is the advantage of this thing? If you talk about the constraints in Oracle, if you create a table and if you define the primary key, it will not allow any duplicate values and it will not allow any nullable values. That means by default, when you create a constraints, it is auto enable in the Oracle or SQL Server. But in the Snowflake or like any other column oriented databases or big data environment, right? Specifically Snowflake, the constraints will not get enabled. Just it will create only not null will be enforced. Suppose if you create a table and if you mentioned the primary key, even if it is a primary key, you can insert the duplicate data, but you can't insert only nullable values. That means only by default null will be enabled. Remaining things will not get enabled. Only thing is, out of all the constraints, either primary key or not null, unique constraint, right? Foreign key constraint, all those constraints you can create. But what will happen in the data warehouse? By default, those things will be disabled. But not null is, if you create a not null, automatically it will get enabled. You can't insert the null values. How to minimize? Okay. If you look into here, this is the GUI environment. You can this is the GUI environment. If you want to install a client environment, you can connect a client. That means you have to you can go here, help, and from here you can download whatever the clients you want. Windows client you can download from here, right? If you look into here, maybe see here. So all the JDBC drivers, ODBC drivers. If you want to download Python components, Node.js drivers, Spark connector, anything. If you want to download, you can connect. You can download. If it is a SnowSQL, if you want to locally connect this one, just to download this one. From here, you can connect the data. You can connect the Snowflake environment. By default, these are all the roles will get created, and all the roles. All right, it is a super user. Super role is that is the top. It is a boss, account admin, sysadmin, public, security admin, and user admin. Based on the nature of the work, what work we are going to do, we can assign the particular role default it will have sysadmin. Okay, you can assign the particular role to that particular user, but please make sure don't give any access to the public role and assign this public role to any user. That way everyone have the public user. But the problem is if you assign any access to the public role, everyone will get that access. That is the reason. Please make sure while you are doing the user management, we have to create a proper access management policies. Okay. There is one new concept is called access policies, at the row level access policies and column level access policies. If you look into the views, who are aware of the views in the Oracle or SQL Server, right? That views, we are restricting the data without reading others, right? Authorized persons can read the data using views. Like that, if you want to restrict the something, you can create access policies, and the access policies will restrict the data either with the row access policies or column level access policies. So everything in the here we can demonstrate, and everything we can show, we can practice. We have, if you want to create procedures, you can whatever the queries we want, what are the stored procedure, how to create the stored procedures. You can see here, this is the stored procedure is in the JavaScripting language. You have to mention just a simple, there are simple JavaScripts. If you want to create any views, you can create all those views. We can create and we can practice everything, and we can in the environment we can set up this environment, and we can download all the clients, and we can connect from the Python, we can connect from the local SQL client, and we can do everything. If you want to create the warehouse, you can go and create here. It is as of now it is suspended, but if you want to create, just I lost this one. Okay, you can create this warehouse. All right. And if you want to share anything, you can share. These are the databases I have. See MyDB, Snowflake sample data, DemoDB, everything. And if you want to create everything, you can create one more database here. So if you create whatever the queries I have executed, all that information will be available in the history schema. See here, all the queries, sample queries, whatever you have executed, all the queries it is with it. You can see here. Okay. Any questions? Any questions?
No issue at this point.
Thank you. Ganesh.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Are we good? Any
Yes.
questions you have? Otherwise, we'll wind up this one.
I don't know from my end. Sandeep, do you have any questions?
Ishwar, one question, like, do we have any certification for this Snowflake, which is available in the market, Ishwar?
Correct. Yeah, there is a certification. Snowflake Pro is available, and for that we can explain what exactly the query questions will come, which areas you will get the query questions, and almost 75 questions will get that one. And out of 75, how to clear that one, I will explain the questions and I will share the questions to you.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, Sandeep. Then if you don't have any questions, then we can wind up the session now.
And
you can
last
check with
question. So this Snowflake, right? When did it actually came into market, Ishwar? Like
it came actually it came in 2010. Okay, but right initially there were some issues but past 6 years or 5 years from 2014 it became very popular. But past 3 years, if you look into the even Snowflake share also, right, it is really growing the share in the US market, right, the share, because it is very less maintenance. It's very minimal maintenance actually. You don't want to go and put the DBA. You don't want to go put the architect, right? You don't want to search for the data center. Okay? You don't want to search for the network. By default, what we are doing before, if you want to buy a cluster, if you want to buy a server, right? You have to analyze what is your IO throughput and what is your how much data you are going to store into database, and how many queries parallelly concurrent sessions you will execute. All those things you have listed out. right? Based on that one, you will decide this much memory is required and this much storage is required. But down the line, it may or may not. Suppose assume concurrent sessions or concurrent queries, you will execute 100 queries per minute. But down the line, it may increase, right? In such a case, you will not, you don't have enough resources. And that time, you have to increase your memory, right? That will, again, it will cost. But what will happen in the Snowflake and the data warehouse in the cloud environment, right? You don't want to do any scale. Suppose as of today, you don't know anything, just you started the database, you are inserting the data, you created on a small VM. That is, VM will have only 2 CPUs and only 30 GB memory, and CPU, 2 CPU means one is logical and other one is physical, and some storage 40 GB or 50 GB memory storage, temporary storage. But tomorrow or 1 week down the line, if your queries are keep on increasing and your storage capacity is required, if you want your processing the queries are more, it got doubled. Just you can go and add here, right? Just simply you can go add here. You want to just click here and add. That's all. See here, just a small we have added, right? The main advantage is this is if you want to assign this one for loading the data, I can create for extracting the data. If some other person only CIO, if you want to separate resources, yes, I can go and simply create one separate virtual warehouse, right? Everything you can do. Suppose if you don't want to do this way, suppose today you have used this one, tomorrow you don't want to. You can define after how many times auto suspended. I can mention 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, if I am not using, automatically get suspended. Next time when you are executing this query, then only it will get enabled. So that means we are reducing the cost. Everything is based on the seconds calculation, right? That is very advantage. Any other questions?
So are there any production implementation completed for this Snowflake? Is there like any company?
There are several critical applications are running, and not even one or two. There are very critical applications. Even sorry, there are several applications, not even one. You can go and check that Snowflake site. There are very critical and mission critical applications are there. Very sensitive data it is maintaining there. There are two options are there. People who are looking into the very minimal downtime. Suppose if you want to upgrade the Teradata, what you have to do? You have to shut down your Teradata, right? And you have to vendor has to come into the picture, right? And you have to start upgrading. That will be taken care by vendor. If the session make it in the Teradata side, right? If you make it as a sessions 0, again you have to call to the Teradata support, and that guy will come to the data center and they will change that one, right? But in the Snowflake side, if you know the database knowledge, SQL knowledge, there is a very minimal cloud environment knowledge, that is enough. You don't want to, if you are familiar with the SQL and if you are familiar with the writing the queries and the procedures and minimal JavaScripting, that is enough. JavaScripting is optional. That means everything we can achieve within the SQL. If at all not possible, then only you can look at for the UDXs.
Okay, understood.
Okay. Anything else?
I think Venkat joined.
Hi Venkat. I think he is on mute. Venkat, are you on mute?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I had a problem with internet. It took some time to resolve the problem.
No. Do you have any specific questions?
Actually, I missed the entire session. No problem. I'll catch up with Sandeep and I'll take the inputs from Sandeep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ishwar. Thanks a lot.
Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye.